All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are in the HR stream here. It's such a pleasure that so many of you are joining from so many different countries all over the world. My name is Simrit Sandhu. I am an innovation consultant and a senior business development manager at World Data Lab. And today I have the honor to guide you through this awesome panel. The topic of our session is the female factor in the workplace. We will be discussing how and why female qualities are seeing such an upswing in relevancy when it comes to leadership and financial success. We have invited amazing speakers, and may I introduce to you Maggie Seiler. She's the founder of Monday Square, a consultancy service for early founders. Maggie has successfully built and scaled global high-tech startups such as Tesla, Lilium Aviation, and BlackBerry. On the other side, we have Toni Cairns. Toni is an HR leader whose career spans 18 years in global consumer good companies. Toni is currently the global HR director of JDE, the world's largest pure play coffee company. So before we get into the discussion, I would like to ask my guests to introduce themselves briefly. Maggie, why don't you start saying a few words?
Perfect. Thank you, Simrit. So hello from Hampshire. I'm Maggie. I'm originally from Vienna, from Austria, and I have lived in the UK for almost 16 years now. And I've recently founded my company, Monday Squares, to really follow my passion and work with early founders to focus on their people strategies. So I really believe that teams can move mountains. You just need to know how to hire, scale, and lead them. And that's where I come in. So with regards to my career, I have worked for larger corporations, but I really found my passion in building and scaling startups when I worked for BlackBerry, in case anyone still remembers the BlackBerry phones. And I was fortunate enough to join Tesla when it only had 30 people in Europe and 300 people worldwide. So most people didn't even know Elon back then, and Elon is now a household name, right? Mm-hmm. And in 2017, I joined Lilium in Munich, in case we have anybody in here as well who is in Germany, to build their teams from the ground up and get their electric air taxi into the skies. It's going to be epic, our future. And most recently, I served as the CPO for a progressive construction technology company called Lecolabs in Luxembourg. Mm-hmm. And my very latest exciting project is actually writing a book with Margareta, a culture and communications expert and a dear friend of mine. And not surprisingly, this book is aimed at startups, right? That will give founders, HR, and communications professionals tools to form the unique company culture, surround themselves with incredible people, and lead their dream teams to success. And that's
amazing.
Me. So thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I'll hand the word over to Toni. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and also welcome to everybody. I think we have a hell of an act to follow after Dame Stephanie, but we'll give it our very best shot. So yes, my name's Toni Cairns. I'm British, but actually, unlike Maggie, who is Austrian living in Britain, I am a Brit living in the Netherlands. I've been here about 5 years. Indeed, we set up JDE, Jacobsdouw Egberts, in 2015, and it was a merger of two huge companies that we had to then start again with. So it's been really exciting. Prior to that, I lived in Zurich in Switzerland for a few years, where I had the honor of leading, from an HR perspective, the chocolate category of Mondelez International. So great for the career, not so great for the waistline. And prior to that, I was in numerous companies in the UK, including Cadbury's, but also Reckitt Benckiser. I have a huge passion for leadership, talent development, and culture. And I have this rather naive aspiration that I believe everyone at work can be happy and should be happy. And for me, Absolutely. It's a very simple goal. And I think the female factor is doing an awful lot to enable that, which is why I'm so happy to be a mentor for you guys, as well as to be here today.
We are thrilled to have you both actually, and I would love to get into some questions. By the way, you can also post your own questions in the chat, and we will get back to that, to the questions at the end of this talk. So maybe we'll start with you, Maggie. Can you tell us or open this discussion with telling us what the main qualities you think are that women bring to the table when it comes to the workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I managed to find the unmute button, so that's so good. So for me personally, I think there's three main things that I'd say that women bring to the workplace. So the first one for me would be, people who communicate really well. We're people who communicate really well, and we have the ability to bring people together, outside of work, inside of work. That's a really good female quality of ours. The second one I'd say is the ability to stand up for themselves and what we believe in. I think we're really good at that. And empathy and connection with people comes to mind as a third point. Okay. And if you don't mind, I'd actually give some examples of that as well. Mm-hmm. So when I think about bringing people together and communicating well, Rachel Conrad comes to mind, who I worked with at Tesla in the early days. She was our communications director at the time. And I vividly remember, her energy, her passion, and how she always got us together, around the table. And she always got us together, get us to talk. And I never forget the day that when Tesla actually went public. So for weeks, Rachel was talking about it. And eventually she gathered us around the laptop, super scrappy at the time, to watch Elon and his family at the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the bell. That was the most amazing experience. And Rachel made it so much better because she always brought us together, and she's such a great communicator.
Amazing.
So that was one example I could think of, and I thought that was worth sharing, And when it comes to the ability for women to stand up for themselves, I actually wanted to share with you guys maybe a more personal experience. And I actually think of my great aunt, Rosa Heinz. I have been blessed, to come from a family of highly empathetic, friendly, strong-minded women. And Rosa was a very hardworking individual. When she joined the Vienna Transport Organization, for any of you who are in Vienna, in the 1950s, she really smashed that glass ceiling for females, because this really was a men's job at the time, if you think about it, right? So even the uniforms were made for men. And they only had one set of working uniforms, I remember being told. And I remember my great aunt, you should have seen her, she's awesome, right? She told me that a lot of the tram drivers were obviously complaining, it's really cold in Vienna in the middle of the winter. Who any of you have been there, it's literally freezing. And that one uniform just doesn't work. So the people were really afraid to speak up and complain about that. But my great aunt, Rosa Heinz, she really believed that things had to change. Mm-hmm. And she addressed it, she went to the head office and things did change. She goes, "Oh, sorry, I do apologize. That was not on purpose." Going back to my beautiful great aunt Rosa Heinz, what I was trying to say is she actually went back and she did change some things. So she got things changed at head office, uniforms came out, and she was even elected to become Works Council member in the 60s. And her career actually doesn't stop there. So she later went into politics in Vienna, doing many great things, including pushing for equal pay for men and women, which is super, super good. And for me, this is an exciting example of females standing up. And it's really powerful, when we stand up and we make things better for everyone, really.
Great. Thank you for such a personal way of answering this question. So we have actually already heard that these qualities that women bring to the table actually benefited the places that they came actually to be. And Toni, maybe you can elaborate a little more on that. What actual tangible benefits do you think increasing gender diversity can bring for companies and organizations?
There's an absolute multitude. And I think that's such a nice story as well. Thanks for sharing that, Maggie. That, again, we see women of a certain generation who had to be real trailblazers in this. And I'm a bit privileged now is the traction has started and we can actually start tracking the impact. And I think there's been some incredible research done in the last probably 2 or 3 decades that, again, I think it's important we also share and shout about, because it can be misinterpreted that having women in the workplace is, it's just the right thing to do. It's a nice thing to do. We need to help the ladies. And I will always refute that. It is important we're there because it makes good business sense. And there's been some fantastic impacts. I mean, if I think about, there was a 20-year study that was done on Fortune 500 companies. And there was an absolute undeniable correlation. Those companies that had the best track record of promoting women also had between 20 and 70% more profitability than other Fortune 500 companies. It is undeniable. Women make good business sense. And it goes on. I mean, I'll give you one more, and then I'll give you some maybe less tangible pieces.
Maybe you can put the link to that
Sure.
in the chat, so
yeah,
our audience
absolutely.
can actually follow up. Yeah.
It's well worth looking at. McKinsey have also done a fantastic study, also on Fortune 500 companies, more recently even. They found that the higher and the greater your gender diversity at the top levels of management, you find 20% more likely to be above average profitability than other Fortune 500 companies. Again,
well, there you go.
It's not a nice to have. It's an imperative if you want a competitive advantage in business. And then from my HR lens, let's say, I can also point to a huge number of things. I mean, think about the breadth of the talent pool. If you exclude women, you exclude 50% of skills. And actually, there was a really interesting piece also by that McKinsey study that said if you access the total talent pool that exists, including all the women, we could potentially add $12 trillion to the global GDP in the next 10 years. I mean, again, for me, it's
phenomenal.
It's really incredible. And then I'm not even touching on the impact on creativity when you have diverse perspectives in teams, the enhanced collaboration when you have people with a broader set of communication skills, which women do have, when you have better customer insights because you're actually representing the people you're trying to sell to, the employer brand impact of having diverse. I mean, honestly, I could talk forever about it.
Well, there you go. The hard facts are there. So if I am founding a company, or if I join a company and I know that females could actually help us be more successful, what do I do and how do I go about unleashing the power of the female factor, or just supporting my female employees use their potential, use all the qualities that we have just talked about? Maggie, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I just want to talk in general and jump in what Toni just said, because she makes some really great research and really great information for this panel. I think just in general, regardless where you are as a company, at what stage you are, early stage or late stage, I think it is so important to think about creating those flexible workspaces, right, that work around families as a whole. So think about 4-day working weeks, think about job sharing, part-time jobs, flexible working policies are super important. People want to know, can they work from home? Can they start at different times? But it's also really, really important, I find, and this is where we can get better at, is that we give people meaningful career options when they return to work. So this is specific to the females. And I really have to agree here with Toni. We can increase our pool of diversities. Think about the men that are out there who might be looking after children themselves. So think about students, think about people towards the end of their career who may prefer a part-time job over a full-time job. Your possibilities are really endless if you crack this.
Toni, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, obviously, in the sense of creating accessibility. I think the other thing I'd probably add to it is to add awareness. So one of the things I've found really powerful over the last kind of 10 years is I've maybe underestimated the impact of doing self-awareness building sessions. So I mean, whether you use Myers-Briggs, whether you use DISC, I'm a big fan of Insights Discovery, but these kind of personality tools that have really grown in popularity the last sort of 30 years in corporate environments have a really positive impact as well on gender diversity. And the reason is, I think there's an element of stereotyping that goes on. And there is an aspect of that is fact-based. So women are more empathetic. They are better at reading nonverbal cues. I mean, this is fact, it's science. But then beyond that, there are also elements of stereotyping that are not fact, you know, like men are more confident, or men are better at negotiating. I mean, these things are not fact. They're actually just perception. And when we use things like these personality tools to build self-awareness, what I find really helpful in companies is that the men start to get more permission to be more authentic and to be less stereotyped themselves. And at the same time, the women get the same. And what we do is we change the conversation from us and them, and we change it to all of us are different, and all of us use the different styles that we have, whether you're extrovert or introvert or rational or emotional. We try and create the sense that every team needs a blend. And it doesn't matter where the blend comes from. And actually, there was a question in the chat that I just wanted to reflect back on for Lizanne, which is that element about the male working atmosphere is often the kind of dominant, loud, etc. And what I find is the biggest risk is that as women, we are kind of convinced that what we need to do is be more like that to be successful.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what we don't do is we don't empower other women and other styles to step forward. What we do is we just kind of accidentally add to the problem. So that's why I come back to the importance of not just creating the accessibility that Maggie was talking about, which is crucial, but also the awareness that style is what we're really trying to access as well. And therefore, please as well, make sure that you're really bringing yourself and giving permission for other people to be themselves as well in a team. So that's one way to influence the kind of male working atmosphere as well, Lizanne.
So essentially taking the focus of gender and more on personality, traits and style.
It's getting the balance right, isn't it? Because we have to be intentional about the gender, but realizing it's not just because of gender, it's because of what that brings that's so important.
Beautiful. So you've talked about what you've learned or what you wish you had known 10 years ago, that the personality types and the qualities are such a big part of the environment you work in. So let's take a step back and look into the future. What do you think that 10 years time, will be important in the workplace? What skills, what qualities should women invest in, or not just women, everybody invest in? What will be more relevant? Maggie, you coming from this startup thriving environment, can you tell us more?
Yeah, for sure. So if I maybe just focus on the industry, and then I let Toni maybe give us some insight more about the actual skills, I think that would be great. So I really think that the ability to code is important, because if you think about coding, it's almost like a second universal language of its own by now, right? And people working with software on software are literally needed everywhere. So if you think about artificial intelligence, think about robotics, think about driverless cars, autonomous aircraft, virtual reality, 3D printing. There's so many cool tech jobs out there. So, you know, this is really going to be a big one. But also if we think about connected virtual healthcare, for example, that is on the rise. So I think it's really important for the future. COVID-19 has really made us aware of that. And one thing that I've also noticed, and it's just very noticeable here in the UK and in the US, is there's already a shift on businesses on how they can become more sustainable. But I really think that we need to push this and make it even bigger. So if you think about how do we handle waste management, you know, how do we handle fashion, the food we consume, the cosmetics we produce and use, in my opinion, so whatever we do, we need to have an eye on sustainability. And I really think that we can't drop the ball here, right? We owe it to the world and these people. So I think this is a big one as well.
Great. So what do I do if I want to get into tech and I can't code? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. So there's plenty of things you can do. Obviously, there's lots of online learning, which is very cheap or for free. So there's certain things like that. I've also seen that our foundations are being built at the moment, different clubs where people can start and learn to code. Remember, there was a particular lady in the US. Her name just can't remember her name right at this second, but I can find out if anyone is interested. She actually built a community, an online community, to help women from underrepresented backgrounds to code. So she invited them for free, got them into a place, and invited them to code. And we see similar stuff like that in Europe as well.
Yeah.
So you could do that. So you can just start just like that.
Well, Toni, what do you have to add? Is coding the way to go?
There's something definitely there, and I noticed Lizanne also has flagged up she codes, which I assume is something very cool in that place as well. Yeah, I mean, if I look at it more from a leadership and a soft skills, which I do hate that phrase, but a leadership perspective. Thank you very much. Power skills perspective. It's sort of, again, looking ahead to work out where are we going to be needing to invest now to make sure that we're leveraging in the future. I mean, it's huge. If you look to 2030, it's estimated that 50% of us in the workforce today will need to reskill. I mean, we are doing jobs in 10 years' time that do not exist today. Yep. So getting ahead of those technical skills is crucial. And even on the leadership side or on the cognitive side, it comes back digital fluency. It is absolutely paramount. But if I take one step further than that, again, if I look at the kind of meta-analysis that Accenture are doing, that Harvard Business Review's done some really great analysis as well, we see a few, I've kind of put them into buckets. So I think one is all around the way we use our intelligence, cognitive flexibility, complex problem solving, and critical thinking. Again, it's a VUCA world, but it's like a VUCA world on acid or something at the minute, isn't it? It's just exploding. So
especially after COVID.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was already crazy, but it just, if I think about, I don't consider myself old. I'm like 42. And when I started in work, like there was no mobile phone technology at work. I had no laptop. If I look at it now, it's crazy. But anyway, cognitive flexibility. So our ability to basically step back from all of the artificial intelligence, all of the bots, everything that you were talking about, Maggie, is going to be doing a lot of operational work, but we're still going to have to do very good in the way of critical thinking about the content. The programming itself requires us to be thinking in creative ways. There is a different element which I kind of group under emotional and social intelligence. So again, as our populations do get more diverse, we are seeing, our Gen Z population thinks totally differently, even to millennials. If we do look at the rise of our Asian workforce, we do look at the fact we've got an aging workforce. So we've got like the Gen Zs coming through, but we've got people working until they're in their 70s. That requires an emotional intelligence that, to be honest, women are better placed with. We all need to practice it, but it's there. And we need to invest in making sure that plus the connection with those topics like sustainability and how communities interact with companies, that social intelligence is only going to grow for the future as well. I think there's another, I would say, third bucket, which again, the pandemic has brought to the fore, but for the next decade, we need to invest in. And these are more of the skills around resilience, tolerance of ambiguity, our ability and willingness for active learning, constantly reviewing, where am I, what else do I need, what's working, what's not. And that very, very intentional reflection is something that we used to do naturally once a year when we went on vacation. I believe it's a skill and a muscle that we need to train on a weekly and daily basis. And then finally, I would probably just conclude this thought with one bucket around adaptability in general. And I'm a big fan of the Charles Darwin quote. I know all of you will have heard, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. And that's where I think we have to invest in ourselves from that perspective.
Well, thank you so much for that in-depth explanation.
Does that mean long-winded? Sorry.
No. I think it was beautiful, very easy to follow, and not too long at all. I have one final question before we go into the Q&A, and that would be just for you to let us know what your call to action would be for HR decision makers and leaders if they want to create equal opportunity for women out there. How do they support them in the workplace?
Absolutely, and I think this is, and again, obviously, I look at myself on this as it's a call to action for me as much as for all of you, and it's for me, it's be intentional. I think we can't get away from the fact that the gender disparity was not in a great place in 2019, and unfortunately, I think both the UN and the World Economic Forum are all pretty aligned that this pandemic has set us back up to a generation. So as companies, we cannot just organically hope that a few nice events around International Women's Day are going to make the difference on their own. So my call to action to all of us is to scrutinize your employee life cycle. You start with recruitment, onboarding, performance assessment measures, promotion measures, parental leave, to your point earlier, Maggie, parental leave return, and finally exit. And scrutinize like hell. Look for the bias. What's the language you're using? What's the policy? What's the manager capability like in your company? And I am going to say it, think about targets. I know it is very controversial, but at least consider them in each area of your life cycle. And then finally, we have got to showcase our role models and communicate. I don't think we have any other choice if we are going to close this gap very soon.
All right. Maggie, anything to add here, call to action for our viewers?
Yeah, so from a personal perspective, from my end, and this might be interesting for some of the HR crowds, you might be doing this already. But for me, it's always working with companies and developing policies that are in line with the company's values. And because I always find that when you go towards the company's values and you put policies around those and together, I find that typically, things get, people live the values of the company. So if you write things into the policy about flexible working, like we said before as well, make sure your people are trained, make sure your leaders understand, like Toni said, get targets around that and do it. And from my personal perspective, obviously, I continue to challenge people around the current beliefs, especially when it comes to the benefits of diversity. And that's why I founded Monday Squares. And that's also why I'm writing a book together with Margareta about a better work environment.
We are very excited to hear from you and your book when it's ready. I will make sure to share it with the Female Factor community. I will now get into a little bit of an interactive session and invite you, everyone, to ask questions. I have this one question coming up right now. How can we incorporate the men as allies to make them understand how important females are, especially in the tech industry? Who wants to answer?
I'm happy to give a first thought. I think allyship is a fantastic topic, and it's something that I think I have the sense that we're underutilizing it as an avenue at the moment. And I think one of the ways in which I see the best male allies I've got, and I have to say I do have a lot in my career, the ones that I think are best are the ones that are two things. One is they are naturally curious about the world around them. So coming back to this style topic again. So for me, I actively now look for traits of curiosity, and I look for traits of men who want to understand, not necessarily the topic of gender or diversity in general, but they're just curious thinkers. And I find they are the best allies. And then I pique that curiosity by asking them questions about whether it's gender diversity in their team or their lives or their peers, or, if I see somebody curious who's working for a man who's working for a woman, and they're a curious thinker, I ask them, what's it like? What's the difference do you see? And what I find is by getting into that discussion, we very quickly can talk about the powerful role they can play in helping support. So for me, that's a natural way I have been working on allyship at a personal level.
Excellent point. Anything to add?
I could add to that if we have some time, yeah. And great examples there, Toni. I think for me, what has worked so far to have men to become allies, I've also been very lucky to work with some great men who naturally are curious and think that, it's an important topic to bring their females in. But for those that needed a little help, I typically talk to them on a quite personal level, to be honest, just figure out what's going on in their home life. Do they have maybe children? Is one of them, a girl, for example? What do they want their future to look like? Or if it's not their own child, maybe their son might have a daughter in the future, or the brother has a female. So I typically try to have conversations around really trying to get their memory going and asking them, what do you want for the future of that person? Because I always find that if you bring it close to home, typically it helps them think a little bit different, because it is literally then something that becomes more personal.
Well, that's something you can do on a personal level if you know someone very well. That's a great point. I hope, Lisanne, that this is a sufficient answer to your question. Seeing another question coming up from Magda. She's saying, I wonder, are companies ready to invest to bridge the gender gap? Do they have dedicated budgets for it, or is it just wishful thinking? What's their experience?
Yeah. I mean, from a corporate level, I think it wildly depends on the company, the context, etc. I mean, we can't get away from the fact that P&Ls are important. They cannot be ignored. However, I think it depends on what you look at it. If you look at it as a cost, or you look at it as an investment. And if I'm talking to a CFO, you can be damn sure I'm not talking about this as a cost. We don't need a budget to fix a problem. We need an investment to leverage an opportunity. Exactly. And therefore, I do believe that I don't think wishful thinking is necessary when you make a good business case. And that is always the way forward. So do as it, some companies maybe put a pot aside and they call it the female fund or something. For me, I'd always rather make a business case and demonstrate the return on that investment, which I know will happen.
Perfect. Maggie?
Yeah, from a startup side, I just really quickly add to that. I think it's important, obviously, to surround yourself with some good founders if you're lucky enough. And if you have founders that need a little convincing, I always find that it's quite helpful if you really get to understand the people strategy and you're really part of that leadership team from day one, and you make them understand the importance of females in the workplace, and you do make sure you get the budget, and you then work with your budget and make sure that you have that buy-in. But I always find getting that seat on the table, being very strategic, same as Toni said, having everything ready, making that business case is definitely helpful.
Well, completely agree. We have one last question. And that's how do the women then influence the male working atmosphere? How is that an impact? That's more in a general sense, I would say. So not specifically talking to your male counterparts, but negotiating a male atmosphere. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I might just start, if that's okay. I used to work in predominantly engineering-led environments, if I'm honest with you, with the companies that I've been in. And I find that when you go in as a female, it does change an environment. It really is like that. Men become different. Think about social gatherings. The time men stand together, a woman comes in, people are different. So it does really change. I think it depends on the type of male that they're in and how many females you can bring in. I've worked in production environments, everything. So you have the opportunity. I think you just need to go in and talk to them, break the ice, which we all just want. I always find with companies, again, going back to the scale-up side of thing, with the companies I've ever worked for, we tended to focus everybody on the vision and the goal of the company. So if you were male or female wasn't actually important anymore, because if anything like that came up, we said, okay, what's the vision of the company? What's our mission? And how do we get there? And everything else, your egos, we're not interested. It could be a way of doing it. Focus your people on what's important, focus the people on the mission of the company, get them together with all the different cultures, and you might see a change if it's a problem.
Good point.
And I would probably just say, on top of the sort of self-awareness topics that I touched on earlier, there's something about taking a deep breath, centering yourself on being the of you that you can be. And I will never shy away from that being my first, second, and third advice to any woman in a workplace. Never strive to be anything other than you. And not only do you then hold on to yourself, but at the same time, I really believe that influences an atmosphere of any description, because the minute you show that you are proud to be you and that you are always going to be 100% authentic to yourself, immediately you give everyone else the permission to start breaking groupthink norms and breaking their own stereotypical behavior to be themselves as well. And that's the most powerful thing, but it does require courage. Yeah. But I also believe women are the most courageous of the species. So I have full confidence that we can all do it. It's just, it's not easy, but it's really impactful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think we have time for one last question. And that question comes from a young professional. I'd like to hear from both speakers, please. If you have any advice you'd give your younger selves as a young female starting your professional career, what would it be?
Do you want to go, Maggie?
Yeah, okay. I think follow your passion would be the thing. And I know everybody talks about it, but I can honestly say it is true. So know your values, try and figure out what are my values, what do I like, what do I don't like, what is acceptable to me in a workplace, what is not, what type of industries interest me. And when you know your values, it typically leads you to finding out what you're passionate about, so it could be helping people, working with people, make them the best version of what they want to be. I'd say probably that's something I'd give somebody. Yeah, I think that's
great advice. I always heard that, and I was never sure if this is the way to go, but it actually helps knowing your values.
Yeah, right.
Toni.
Mine is, it's probably going to sound a bit strange, but get comfortable with conflict is actually the advice I would give. And the reason for that is it helps women on so many levels. I find that women tend to be people pleasers more than men, and they want to smooth the atmosphere because they're empathic, because they read the rooms better. We do a lot of smoothing. And as a result, I find a lot of women, it takes them 10 plus years to get comfortable with conflict in the workplace. Yep. And if you are comfortable with it, it also means you're more likely to stand up for yourself, which means when you hear somebody be a little bit dismissive of you, you say, hang on, let me just come back to that. And you do it in a way that's comfortable and confident, not emotional. And you don't wait to be pushed into the corner before you're establishing your position. It means you're better at salary negotiations. It means you're more likely to go for the promotion internally. It means you're going to end up getting better roles practicing on your negotiation, you're influencing. And it also means you are better at being you because you're also unapologetic for it. So that would be my advice. Get comfortable with conflict.
Thank you so much. We are at the end of our panel discussion. I hope you have had a lot of fun and you've heard things that inspire you in your everyday workplace. Let me know if you have any questions. Please add our speakers on LinkedIn. And I would just like to invite you for some final words before we are saying goodbye. Maggie, you want to start?
Yeah, I start for sure. So I personally live by the credo of be the change you want to see in this world. So I really think that if you want something done differently, if you don't like what you see, just get up, do it, change it. That's would be for me.
Thank you. Toni.
Yeah, and never strive to be anyone but yourself. There's only one version of you and nobody does it better.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this inspiring session. I'm looking forward to actually meeting you at some point. If not in Vienna, then somewhere maybe in the UK.